By the end of this video, you're going to be familiar with the story behind the numbers of Netflix. The myth, the legend. I was reading this article that they're paying like $900K annually for an AI engineer or something like that. That's the sort of money you get when your company name turns into a verb. Let's dive in so that your wisdom can blossom. Auditors complaining about the way Netflix is doing content amortization, some complaints about what they label quote-unquote original programming. I think we all get what the auditor means. Income statement. Lest my eyes deceive me, let me do the calculator. This is a decreasing operating margin, hovering just above 15%. Statement of cash flows. There's both a non-cash amortization of content assets, but then a real cash additions to content assets, continuously needing to raise the baseline of how much content they have. This additions to content assets is a bit like capital expenditure. Typically, it should be thought of as an investing activity, but here they're electing to include it as an operating activity. Why would they do this? Content assets is the biggest thing on the balance sheet, is the biggest thing in the cash flow statement. Intuitively, we can understand that it's a pretty big deal for a streaming service, and it's the only thing the auditor is complaining about. In the conclusion of the opening move, we got to look into those content assets and specifically how the amortization is being calculated. In the notes to the item 8, what I find interesting is that their amortization is on an accelerated basis. Films being amortized even more aggressively than TV series. When Netflix quote-unquote uploads a piece of content onto their service, they expect it to be consumed basically right away, but it's an interesting financial question. This is a fundamentally different picture than what most media companies would do from what I'm aware. They view content as a long-term investment. This accounting decision very much expressing the DNA of the business in when it comes to creating content or purchasing content. They want it to make a splash and then not cause too much trouble beyond that. Their justification for this approach is that the business model is subscription-based, not generating revenue at a specific title level. Actually admitting to investors straight up, until we have to, we're not gonna actually think about content more than is it gonna have a click-through rate the very first couple of days or not. That's pretty interesting, and I'll tell you why. Content has always been consumed with a subscription. There's never not been content without subscription unless you're talking about radio like recently. There is capital expenditures built into that business model. Balancing act, I guess I would call it, coming from Netflix. But really it smells a little bit like they just don't want to be bothered to do everything that the Hollywood studios do. We can actually figure it out though. Let's calculate the inventory turnover. We're gonna do a special content asset turnover. In the latest year, they've had 31.6 billion in sales divided by 32.7 in content assets. That leads to this ratio, making 365 days in a year. On average, their inventory takes about a year, a little more than a year actually, to generate sales. Now, this is not how long a show generates revenue. Very different. This would be probably closer to, hey, if you're getting more comfortable uncovering the stories behind the numbers, please like and subscribe. How long do they have to wait between seasons of a show in order to order the second season, for example, right? So you actually want this to be shorter. If this is a smaller number, then you can renew seasons more quickly. You can try out different shows more quickly. You can overall have a more quote-unquote efficient content business. Last year, this was about 3 days longer, and so trending in the right direction, Netflix becoming a couple days more efficient in terms of doing this. If the days to inventory stays longer than a year, or so roughly 360, 365, cost of revenues will continue to increase in the next year as long as they can't get that below 1 year. As soon as they get that below 1 year, we might at least see a tapering off in cost of revenues growth rate. If they really get it significantly below a year, cost of revenues might even modulate, might even come down some. That's the game being played by Netflix right now, how to efficiently create content. They can either increase that efficiency by making more revenue come in for every dollar of content that they have on the balance sheet, or by straight up just reducing the number of shows that they put out, or at least how much they're paying for the shows that they put out. All of this is likely going on at Netflix, and it's not really an option because while the company is profitable and in a great position, this is not the income statement of a stable state. A little tricky because at first glance it looks pretty healthy, but then look at net income. This is actually decreased despite an increase in revenue, with absolutely no growth in investment in marketing and only a very reasonable growth in technology and development. This net income may go up, may go down, but in terms of efficiency, the business is actually less efficient each year and will continue to get less efficient each year. They're in this downward spiral unless they get that efficiency in content asset investments to at least below a year. We're now going to call in the Sage Seeds AI to see what it thinks. Subscription models used to have the reputation of being just absolutely fantastic business. But then as people started to get creative with them, they actually aren't as automatically great as they used to have the reputation for. Netflix is a fantastic example of that. While the subscription model is very, very close to being as great as it would be in software and all these other industries, it's fundamentally not the same industry. One piece of content is not the same as another piece of content. One subscriber is very much not the same thing as another subscriber. When these are the realities of your business, you cannot treat it like if you were a software company in Silicon Valley in the early 2000s and all that mattered was getting a lot of clicks. It actually matters what people are clicking on in this industry. Please like and subscribe. Remember that this channel is about practicing listening to the stories behind the numbers and then developing an intuition about whether that story does or does not represent value. Please pause the video to take a moment if you haven't tried to guess yet. It helps so much to explain what you're thinking. Netflix is ranked 134 out of 336 in value for the 2022 season, comfortably in the top third-ish. I'm now going to interpret what the Sage Seeds AI seems to be picking up on. The financial situation is one of relative strength. Netflix is not some small company trying to figure itself out. Netflix is an established force. Yes, there are legitimate risks preventing this from being ranked much higher than this, but within the context of you can never assume that you just buy random things and then show them to people forever. There is a runway here. In the worst case, the licenses that Netflix has been acquiring, they consider it to be over 30 billion in content assets, represents a decent floor. But any scenario other than kind of the doomsday of impairment charges, loss of subscribers and revenue, all happening at the same time and quickly, that Armageddon scenario is really the only thing that would stop this from being a choo-choo train has already left the station and profit is going to roll in even if it might not be perfect. Thank you if you watched until the end. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Then share this video, share your wisdom.